Welcome to my channel, Bobo Bun So Vintage Life. I'm Lisa, a vintage seamstress and a dressmaking teacher who loves to share my huge passion for sewing with you and hopefully inspire you along the way. Today is the second part of my videos looking at vintage patterns. In the first one, which was last week's, I looked at true vintage original patterns, and in today's video I'm going to look at vintage inspired patterns and vintage reproduction patterns. So join me back in a moment and we'll start looking at them all. So today is the second video where I'm looking at vintage patterns. In my first one, which was last week, I looked at original vintage sewing patterns, and today I want to look at reproduction vintage patterns and vintage inspired patterns. There are so many places you can go for all of these, so I've obviously just picked a few. There won't be all that I've used because there's just too many, and there will be lots I've missed out. I'll try and link to as many as I can, and I will pop links down below that may be useful for you. So I'm going to start off with what I'm wearing, because this one is a vintage reproduction pattern, but on Foxy Lady on my mannequin is a vintage inspired pattern, so I'll look at her a bit later. But both are sewn in original vintage 1950s cotton. One of my favourite shops to go to, Susie Sharp Vintage. I've mentioned her before. When I'm making especially a vintage inspired pattern, I love to use true vintage fabric just to give it the feel, and a lot of the techniques involved. So yeah, I'll look at those along the way as well. So this pattern is from a vintage Vogue. It's looking quite tatty. Always does with these. I'm not a fan of tissue paper in these envelopes. I absolutely adore, can you see that a bit closer? I adore the artwork on them, but they don't stand the test of time, and they never fold back in the envelope. And the tissue paper is always very fragile, so I tend to trace them off. This one is Vintage Vogue 8789. I've actually not made the boat neck version yet. I kept meaning to, but this one, which is the one that I'm wearing, I've made 4 times now. This is the most recent incarnation. So I'll pop some pictures up of the other 3 that I've made, because I made one in green, one in a black and orange with reds, which I've not worn as yet, and one in sort of lime and brown, which is a very wintry one, shorter length. I absolutely love this pattern. It's a very simple design, as you can see on here. They're cap sleeves, it's grown on sleeves, the facing is all cut in one. I love how the pattern is about cutting it on the bias so that you get the chevron effect with stripes. So I always try and use a striped fabric. Should I stand up, because you need to see the other bits, don't you? So I've put the full skirt on this and pockets inside. I've used some other fabric that I've got, if you can see that there, and made a belt using a lovely buckle from my stash. And this skirt's also got a waist stay on it, just to support the weight of the skirt. So I'll talk about stays in another video. I'm sure stays fascinate me. So yeah, I've done that. I've got a side zip so I can easily get into the dress. The dress is designed with a side zip anyway. But that's Vintage Vogue, and it's a 1957 design. So I absolutely love that pattern, and I'm sure I'll make more. Then more recently, if we're still looking at Vogue, I made this one for a Lamazy Fabrics blog post. It's a very formal dress. It's not necessarily so much me, but I really wanted to try out the pattern because there's so many little details. I don't know if you can see on the back there all the pleats. I'll pop a picture up as well. So I had great fun. They're all like little pin tucks at the back. I had great fun making this. It is a beautiful dress. I haven't worn it out yet, but that's Vogue 9346, and that's the 1947 design. And it says it's comes from the pattern collection of the Raleigh Burleson, courtesy of those. Often with the Vintage Vogue, they'll say where they got the pattern from, because these are all from original designs that they're re-releasing. So often, you know, the Simplicity group will re-release a lot, and by simplicity I mean they had McCall's, Butterick, Vogue, I think New Look. There's probably about 8 pattern companies under Simplicity now, but they'll go to the original re-release. Some they'll pull out, so you can't get, but you might find them on eBay, or another seller might have them. So the beauty of using these is that, unlike buying the vintage original, which comes in one size, and you either need to find your size or have the ability to grade it up or down, so you need a few more skills, these will come in a range of the sizes. Obviously with the Vogue you've got to be careful, because I'll just look at this pattern again. This one is 14 to 22, but if you need the smaller sizes, say 6 to 12, you buy those. So you've got to buy the pattern, and if you're a 12, say in your bust and you're 16 in your waist, you either need to buy both patterns, which is dead expensive, or again you need to be able to grade the pattern up. So yeah, they're not great in that they've got a range of sizes, but with Vogue you need to buy the 2, and you need to double check which you're buying, because otherwise you could end up buying the wrong size and you've wasted your money. So yeah, I've got those. I'm going to look at the other reproduction patterns I've got in front of me that I have sewn. I've got this Simplicity 1278, and it's this beautiful little blouse, whereas it's this one that I made, and I wear it again and again. I don't know why I've not made it anymore. It made it in a white with a black polka dot, and it goes with so much. I love wearing it on its own and under things, and that's a beautiful little pattern, that one. I think I omitted, I can't remember if it's a back placket. Yes, a placket at the back. I omitted it because it fitted me perfectly. It goes on, but it's got a side zip, so that's that pattern I've made before. And then in my Simplicity pile to make in the future, I've got this one, the 8731. I love the manto coat, and it's got a little bow at the back, and the dress is absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you can see closer up, I'll put a picture up. The bodice and the skirt, which is very similar to another skirt I'm going to show you, the Leslie skirt. I'll just see if I can find that here now, just to show you. Let's get that on my folder. See, they're very similar skirt designs. But one day I will get around to doing a toile of that dress so that it fits me. The other pattern that I've got in my must make pile is this lovely Simplicity 84, I'm reading on the back, 8456, this petticoat and slip. I wear a lot of petticoats under my clothes. I tend to line a lot of my bodices. This one isn't because it's got self-facing. I think I've said before, I'm not a fan of facings, how they flip up. I mean, this one, I can't remember if I've stitched this one all round. No, I haven't. So yeah, they are a faff. They can flip up and they really get on my nerves. I think I stitched all around the arm facing on this one, because them flipping out just and trying to tuck them in the back, oh, it drives me up the wall. So I prefer to line my bodices, not so much for the see-through because I could wear a slip underneath, but because I don't like facings. But I won't line a skirt unless, let's say, it's a pencil skirt that's going to stick to me in a wool and I need the lining, you know, so it will hang right. But a full skirt, I would just put a petticoat underneath so you're not seeing my knickers and right through, you know, to the top of my legs. So that petticoat is on the list of to be added. Now Butterick, I think, is one of my favourite for the reproduction. This one, again, I've made quite a few times. I've made it, I haven't made it with the bows on shoulder. I love them, but I always think then I'm restricted, you know, about putting a cardigan over the top. You know, otherwise it looks like you've got big growths on your shoulders, you know, underneath the cardigan. So as much as I love that design, it would limit the wearing. So I've made it as a sheath dress. And yeah, quite a few years ago now I first made this, about 7 years ago, in quite dark colours, not necessarily my colours, but feel really good in the shape, so I might revisit that. I think I've made it in a black sparkle velvet in the sheath dress, and then I did make it up for Minerva a long time ago. I was the ambassador for Minerva, but I stopped doing that. Didn't really like the fabrics that were on offer. Shouldn't say that, should I? It's probably a bit naughty. But I made that with the full skirt on. So again, I might revisit that because it is a beautiful, beautiful pattern. But this is like a 1961. I think that's really sassy. I love that one. And then we come to one where, you know, I've ripped the envelope so much, so I've had to put the pattern in here. The Butterick 6055. Now I haven't bothered making the whole dress because I do have a pattern, many blouse patterns and bodices for this top, but it's the skirt I'm drawn to and those pockets. And I love, you know, the slim fit through from the waist, the hips, tummy, so it's really flattering, going out into a circle skirt at the bottom with these beautiful, beautiful pockets. I don't know if you can see behind me, I've got two that I've finished up there in a pink from Rainbow Fabrics called, but it's a pink cotton linen mix. And then it's a vintage mustard fabric that I got at the Stitch Festival. And I've made loads more and I've added them to skirts and whatever. I'm getting a bit obsessed with this skirt, but I don't care because it's so comfy and flattering and gorgeous. So I think that's all of those ones from, you know, reproduction from the big four that I want to show you. And then I go to the indie designers online. I'm going to look at the first one here because this is a beautiful, beautiful pattern. This is from Now and Then Patterns. It's Till the Sun Goes Down. So Andre sells the most amazing fabrics, a lot either copies from dresses that are in the V&A collection, you know, so she'll source original designs and get them made up. So it's beautiful, beautiful. I remember watching, what's it called, the Singapore Grip, which I really enjoyed, and my daughter said it was the most turgid thing they'd ever seen. I didn't think the drama was good at all, but I really enjoyed it. And sometimes I don't know if I'm enjoying the drama more because of the visual feast of the clothes. But I saw a lot of Andre's fabrics made up, you know, the costume designers had bought fabric from her, so it was really lovely seeing them made up and worn within their period setting. So that was beautiful. Andre very kindly gifted this pattern to me, the Richmond blouse, when we were doing our Christmas challenge, which we will do again this year. So I've made it in this version twice, the shawl collar, and I still want to get on to make a short sleeve pussy bow. It's like a lower one with a bow. That's a beautiful, beautiful pattern. And I have made other patterns of hers. I think the Clara bow blouse and a dress, and I do want to get, there's a beautiful sundress of hers. Can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I will flick up an image of that, so I want to get hold of that. Now what shall I show you now? Right, so I'll go over to one of my favourites, and I've already shown you the skirt. It's Wearing History. Last week's video I was wearing the home front overalls and the smooth sailing blouse from Wearing History. Lauren is an amazing designer. I love going to her because she will go to original vintage patterns and then she will size them up so they fit our modern bodies, and I think she's got quite an extended size range now for them. They used to finish at a 20, which was what I would cut, so not a 20 as we know it, you know, in ready to wear, but in vintage size 20 I would be sewing those patterns, but she's extended the size range now. So one of my favourites, I'll pull it out of the plastic, is the smooth sailing blouse. Absolutely adore this, and I've made this a few times, and I've started to round the collar tips, and sometimes I'll do 3 or 4 rows of stitching on the collar to give it a 30s feel. I'll put more 30s sleeves in rather than these 40s sleeves. And I've also hacked the blouse into a bodice to make a shirt dress. I've done that a couple of times with 2 different type of skirts, so absolutely love that pattern, and it's definitely getting its mileage with me. Then we've got the home front overalls, which I've made a few times, and I've talked about those before. Rather than get them out, I'll just show you in the folder. So I keep my instructions in, you know, a folder. So that's the home front overalls, and I've made those into trousers. I've got them in white linen. I've made them in cordon. I've made them in wool for the winter when I was copying from watching the most recent Rebecca film. So I made them in a herringbone wool, you know, I must make a jacket to go with it. I've got the lovely Leslie skirt, which I've still not made because I haven't made the pattern up yet. I've printed it, the PDF, but I haven't made it up. That's the beauty of buying these reproduction patterns. You can then buy them as PDFs because Lauren's in America, so if I was buying a proper pattern, I don't know if she started to phase those out yet because it's easier to buy PDFs, but I can then get the PDF straight away. So I love the ease that I can buy the pattern and then I can download it at home rather than waiting for something to be sent to me. So I think that's all with Lauren. I do also love Decades of Style. I've bought a few from them. And one pattern, I'm trying to find the pattern here. It's right at the back of this folder. Let's try and get this pattern out. It means I'll unload everything in here. It's the bell curve dress, which I absolutely love. I don't know if you can see the details on there. Now, I've only ever made this as a wearable toile, which, you know, I have been out to. I went to a swing dance event in it, but it's not great fabric. But I just wanted to try the pattern out. So it's in this plain red. It sort of feels like wool, but it isn't. I don't know if you can see here. This is the detail I absolutely love. The shaping is done by all of these darts that curve around. And there's a bit of a gather at the back of the skirt. Oh, it's just absolutely delightful. And I feel it needs to be made in a plain fabric to really show off those darts, but maybe I could make it in a printed. And another Decades of Style, I've got the pattern, I've just never made it, is the Objet d'Art dress, which again is absolutely gorgeous. Those beautiful pockets. It's always the details. So yeah, I will be making that at some point. Looking at some of the patterns, and I wanted to look at some books that I've got to recreate the vintage look. So this book is absolutely fabulous. It's Vintage Dress Patterns of the 20th Century by Anne Terrell. So it goes from flapper dresses to 1980s evening wear. So it goes right across. The illustrations in here are absolutely beautiful. I'll just take you through for, you know, my eras. So I've got the 40s jigger jacket, which I think is just a fabulous name. So you've got that, and you've got to grade all of these patterns up. Can you see them there? Just trying to show you some more of the illustrations. Isn't that just beautiful? The 1940s new look skirt, but that's just beautiful. Lady by the Fire. And then we've got the weekend tapered trousers. But all the patterns come like this, and this is where you're going to need some real old skill, because you've got to grade them up. Can you see? So she tells you to trace off those small designs, and then I can't remember the size, but it's normally each square is equivalent to 5 centimetres, something like that. So you need to trace them off and then enlarge them onto graph paper, grid paper. So it's a bit time consuming, and you need to do that. And the same is for the next two books that I'm going to show you. So I'll go to a 40s book, making vintage 40s clothes for women. And this is by a lovely lady, Sarah McGill, who's online on Instagram. And I absolutely love all the inspiration in this. She has pictures of the original patterns and photographs and lots of inspiration, you know, history around. The illustrations for making the clothes in here are absolutely wonderful. Now, I used a lot of the techniques for making my vintage tea dress from here, but I didn't use her pattern. Love that photo, that lady laughing in her dress at the bottom. It's absolutely beautiful. These are the patterns, which again you need to scale up. As I said, I used that vintage tea dress with its V. I made mine from an original 1940s cotton lawn that I bought at a vintage fair. But I used the Sew Over at London vintage tea dress pattern. But then I made it with the 40s techniques from this book. So I put a pop, you know, snap placket in the side. I top stitched my midriff section. So I did a lot of the techniques from this book rather than using the Sew Over at London. I just used those as the starting point. Now, another book I've got here is making vintage 1950s clothes for women. And again, an absolutely beautiful, beautiful book. I just saw a picture of this 40 lady, this amazing blouse here, and the photo of the lady here. There's amazing, amazing photos all the way through. There's undergarments you can make in here for your undercrackers. The boned wires and what has it got? The girdles you can make. Yeah, here you go, bra and girdle sets. And it's an absolutely beautiful book, but again, you need to grade everything up, you know, to your graph paper. So that's those. And then lastly in these, I've got Burda. Now I talked about Burda and their magazine coming out in 1950. So this is a Burda Vintage Star Special. And this was the pink lace that inspired the pink lace cocktail dress that I made. So I bought this years ago, and then as luck would have it, I found the lace fabric. I absolutely love this book, or this magazine rather. I think I'll show you in a video. I'll flick through and show you all the images, but here we go. Here's the princess dress and made up in this pink lace, but you know, it's got beautiful period imagery. When you go to the back, I always find Burda patterns, you know, like I say, it's a bit of a road map of lots going on. That's an absolutely beautiful magazine, again for the vintage reproductions. One other place I would go to for vintage reproduced patterns is Mrs. Depew, but with them you can only buy one size. You know, she literally does copy it over to the, you know, from the original vintage. She doesn't grade it up. The Vintage Pattern Shop is the same. There's a few other, I think it's Vintage Kitten. I'm trying to think. There's so many places you can go to once you start scratching the surface. So some of them you need the skills to grade them up. But that's, I look at the vintage reproduction, and now I'm going to look at the vintage inspired. And I think really I'm mainly going to be focusing on Gertie for vintage inspired. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. No, I think it's Gertie mainly. So anyone who's familiar with Gertie or Gretchen Hurst, this is the book that started it all. She started blogging. She wasn't a sewer. She's self-taught like me. And she worked through Vogue's, can't remember what it's called properly, Vogue's Book for Better Sewing, I believe it was. Makes sense, she's called her Gertie's Book for Better Sewing. So she worked through all the patterns, challenging herself, and then she got picked up. I mean, she did work in publishing, I think it was children's publishing, but she worked in publishing, you know, so she obviously had her contacts and links, but she got picked up, made her book, and the rest is history. I've got all 4 of her books. This one I think is quite hard to get hold of now, the first book. So they come with all the patterns, but it's like a sewing bible at the beginning, with all the vintage techniques, how to finish, understanding fabric. They're just absolutely amazing books and really good value. And then I've got the Gertie Sews Jiffy dresses. Currently making a dress, not with the bodice. I've made quite a few. I think I've made nearly all of them in here, but I'm making a vintage bodice in a pattern, and then I'm using this tiered skirt, so I'll show you that soon. So absolutely love going to her books. Gertie sort of had her incarnation all over the place because we've got her books. She for a while designed patterns for Butterick. So again, these are all vintage inspired. You know, she'll go to her original vintage patterns, her source material, seeing films, dramas, and then she will recreate the pattern to get the look. So this is the one that's on Foxy Lady. It's Butterick 6556. I've made this one a few times, but I never do it with that little cut out part. I always do it straight across square. So that's what's on here, in this absolutely stunning 1950s fabric. And I wore this dress when I went to see the Dior exhibition with my friend Maria. So yeah, and Maria was wearing a dress that I made for her as well. So we dressed up, and I felt very beautiful in this. But sadly, at the moment, it doesn't meet at the back. Yeah, I put a bit of weight on around the middle. So I want to wear this dress. I've cut the seams down, so I can't alter it. And quite frankly, I just want to lose those 2 inches around the middle, and then I can wear those clothes again. Here's another one of Gertie's. This is 6453. Quite a few people I know have made this one, and I've made this only once, you know, in a little strapless bodice, again in vintage fabric from Susie Sharp Vintage. But I want to revisit this. I wasn't happy with the fit on this, on the bodice, so I'm going to revisit that one and have another go at that. So that's a beautiful pattern. And one that I'm working on at the moment, having a few problems with the toile, is this one, which is 6590. and I've got a leopard print cotton sateen that I'm trying to make this one, and then if I nail it I can make a few more. I've had this pattern for so long and wanted to get on with it, so yeah, that's another one I'm working on. And then when we follow Gertie all the way through, we've got her Patreon site, which I followed right from the beginning, and you get a lot of free patterns. I find it really good value. I think I pay about £8 a month and you get a free pattern. Don't always like the patterns. Sometimes there's a few months that I just think, no, they're not for me, but they're not going to be for everyone, are they? You can't please everybody all the time. But in the main, I love most of them and make them. So that one, the Liz dress, I didn't like that at first, but then I made that up into a toadstool print with rabbits on and absolutely loved it. There's so many patterns that I love of hers. And her other patterns are the charm patterns that you can buy as PDF or hard patterns. So let me find one that I can show you. I'm trying to think here. Yeah, we've got the Stanwick skirt, which I use a lot. And that on that Butterick skirt, it's that waistband on the Stanwick skirt that I use. So yeah, I've got loads of those. I do really like her designs, really suit my body shape and the style that I'm after. Now the final pattern I want to show you, moving away from Gertie, and again this is vintage inspired, is the Bella tea dress, which you know that I've been making for a while. This does come from an original, I'm sure it's vintage Vogue. I haven't been able to find it, but I have seen the original pattern, so they've reproduced it. So that's the Bella tea dress that I've made, yeah, in the floral, and then recently in the beautiful fabric godmother, which I haven't photographed and put on here yet. I've only done the bodice halfway through the working project, but I wore it to teach in the other night and it just moves beautifully and everyone loved it, and yeah, I'm really thrilled with it. So I certainly am not finished with the Bella tea dress, and I want to just do the version that's got the tie, not all this fancy frilly stuff in the pockets, but I want the tie neck. So I think that's everything. I'm looking all over my table. I think that's everything I wanted to tell you about for my second part of my video on vintage reproduction and vintage inspired patterns. So I hope you found that interesting, and wait for next week's video, and I shall keep that under wraps what I'm going to talk about next week. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for subscribing, and if you haven't already subscribed and you'd like to not miss out on what I'm chatting about, then you know, hit the button. There's a reminder at the end of the video, and comment, and I can have a chat with you, and it'd be lovely to get to know you more. So until next time, goodbye.